Okay. Somebody asked me if I was nervous, and I said what I learned from Tony Vidler was, if you're not nervous, then you really have something to worry about. So happy building to everybody, because I agree with Moshe, it's not architecture until you build it. And I titled my little 20 minutes, Hum, because I thought this was an impossible assignment to talk about being an architect without being allowed to show any of your work. So I'm going to give it a shot. Moshe did a fabulous job. And I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about myself. 4 things about me, perhaps starting lower left. I am a New Yorker, a very proud New Yorker, particularly this morning. I am a people person. I'm an educator, and bottom right, I'm an architect, albeit not that guy. I'm going to start talking about being a New Yorker. I'm from Queens. I'm very proudly from Queens. Many of you know the borough of Queens. It is the most diverse county in the entire world, where more than 800 native languages are spoken in people's homes. Among the many public schools I went to PS 107 in Auburndale, Queens, not designed by the great C.P.J. Snyder, but in the tradition, and one of those schools that had a playground on the roof. I also went to Junior High School 67 in Little Neck, Queens, home of the indefatigable Panthers, but all-time losing Panthers. And I eventually went to an all-girls boarding school in Massachusetts as a scholarship kid, and all of my education was achieved either through public schools or through scholarships, so it is something I am forever grateful for. But I am, and I will say this in candor to this room, these days rarely proud to be an American, but always, always proud to be a New Yorker. I am also an architect, and not only am I not this guy, I'm neither of these guys either. And I'm not this, although I think this point supreme illustration of the architect's brain centered around ambition speaks to all of us, and how we think and how we work. And the trick in everything we do in the process of making a good building is to balance our own ego-driven ambition with our greater, more generous, more socially driven ambition to make the world a better place through buildings. I decided I was going to be an architect when I was 13 years old. And it's actually remarkable to me listening to Moshe. Our lives couldn't be more different, but in fact, we have many things in common. I'm the kid in the headband. It's the only picture I could find of me at roughly 13 on a Thanksgiving afternoon at my cousin's townhouse on 17th Street. I got an early start creating buildings. As you can see, these sandcastles I made with my brother in Daytona Beach, and building the base for the sandcastles with my cousin Christine. And I, too, was profoundly impacted by Louis Kahn, because in my teenage years, I went to visit a friend who was studying at the Phillips Exeter Academy while the library there was under construction. And so I saw it both as construction and then as a finished building. And it was the experience of this building that truly changed my life, because it is a profound masterpiece. I later went to college. I went to RISD, an art school where I studied architecture, and I dropped out for a host of reasons I won't go into, and went and worked for Paolo Soleri at Arcosante. I loved being able to build buildings at Arcosante. I was quite a bit less taken with Paolo Soleri himself. But another person who influenced me enormously was Charles Gwathmey, because among all the great men of his generation, a generation older than I, he was the only one who was actually nice and kind and generous and supportive of a young woman architect's career. As I said, I'm also an educator, and I love nothing better than the ambiance of a really messy architecture studio. I still teach this, and I've been through some tough times. As was mentioned, I'm the Dean of the School of Architecture at Yale, and I got us through shitty architecture men, Black Lives Matter, COVID, student protests, and as you can tell in this picture, COVID giving a lecture. But I started my teaching career as a very, very young woman in my early 20s when I got out of RISD and there wasn't any work. But there was a fabulous program supported by the National Endowment for the Arts that put artists, dancers, architects, poets, choreographers, you name it, into public schools to try to reach kids who couldn't be reached in other ways. It's a pity this program doesn't exist anymore because it helps support all these creatives, and it also gave kids who weren't connected to the regular curriculum a chance to discover themselves. So you see me here in Flatlands, Brooklyn with my kindergartners, and then my fifth graders who were learning fractions by building scale models. I went on from there and with my friend Larry Kutnicki started a program for high school students at the Institute for Architecture and Urban Studies, which was Peter Eisenman's think tank. I had brown hair then. And you can see me there giving a tour of Manhattan to some high school students. I was barely out of high school myself, and I knew how frustrating it was to know you wanted to be an architect and having nowhere to turn to have somebody to talk to you about what being an architect was like. And then I went and taught at the University of Miami and the University of Maryland, and then was recruited, you can see the giveaway concrete in the back of these pictures, to join the faculty as a very, very junior faculty member at Yale. Where I'm still a faculty member, and where I actually succeeded Robert A.M. Stern, and as was previously mentioned, am the first woman to hold the position. I still like going to crits and sort of both being supportive and kind of frowningly critical, as you can see in this picture. This is just a few days ago. But my mission now, and I won't go around with a hat after this, but if you know anybody with money, my mission as a dean at Yale, and hopefully by doing it at Yale others will follow, is to raise enough money that anybody can go to architecture school without being saddled by debt when they get out. We need to do this for the profession. But telling you about that stuff, of course, makes me think about the people who taught me. Perhaps the person who changed my life the most at RISD was a woman named Judith Wolin, and not a single portrait exists of her online, at least that I could find, except her late entry to the Chicago Tribune Tower competition from 1980, so I put that up in place of her face. It will surprise you all to know that I was equally influenced by Dale Chihuly, who was teaching in those days at RISD. The glassblowing studios were right down the hall from the architecture studios. My work doesn't look like his work, but he had an enormous influence on my life in terms of what it means to make. I later went back to school and studied city planning with Jonathan Barnett at the City University of New York. He had started his career as a young urban planner in the Lindsay administration when they rethought the entire planning of New York City. But I think one also learns from one's clients, as Moshe said, and that's certainly been true for me and for us at TenBerke. A very early client of mine was Peter Halley, the great artist. We shared, a belief in the liney-uppy of things. I like things when they line up, and so did he. And so we got along really, really well. These are what his paintings are like. I worked for another painter later named James Howell, sadly no longer with us, and from him I learned that we shared a taste in palettes. I tend to like things that are black or gray, as are his paintings. Had these wonderful, wonderful clients, Steve Wilson and Laura Lee Brown, the people who built the 21C museum hotels. They had two interests: provocative contemporary art and making it possible for everybody to see it, experience it, and understand it, and a desire to reuse old buildings, adaptive reuse. The wonderful Will Miller, son of J. Irwin Miller, who started the program in Columbus, Indiana, that supports architecture. He continued that program that his father had started and became a wonderful client for us in the support of small and simple buildings. And the graphic designer Sheila de Bretteville, who, while she was chair of graphic design at Yale, insisted that Yale University hire a woman to do a building on campus. She was also a great feminist and taught me a lot about finding a voice as a woman architect, and led to us getting the job to do the Yale School of Art. And finally, Titus Kaphar, another great artist for whom we collaborated on the creation of his artist's residency called Next Haven, another adaptive reuse project. But the thing I said about myself, New Yorker, architect, educator, is I am really a people person. I like people. I like parties. I like going out. I like hanging out. I like people. This is me doing a student project at RISD, interviewing men in Bloomingdale's in, I know, what a cunt, huh? And the way I became a people person was through my parents, who had a long and very happy marriage despite their profoundly different backgrounds. My mother from a DAR, Mayflower-ish, old waspy family, and my father, the son of a Jewish dentist from Brooklyn. They too like to party. You see here my brother, truly a party animal with great taste in clothing. And my mother at age 20 and at age 85. She really knew how to appreciate life. And I think to be a good architect, you actually have to love life. My mother was a fashion designer. She went to the Parsons School of Design, and this is her student work before World War II. There are hundreds of these drawings in the attic of my parents' house. And after my parents retired, they spent their time traveling around the world doing volunteer work as a sort of old people Peace Corps, including helping start a fashion design school in Kenya, which is what this newspaper article is about. My mother was a child of the Depression. She saved everything, and when she died, having lived in the same house in Queens for 57 years, as we cleaned out the house, which had a staggering amount of stuff in it, there were over 80 pairs of scissors. None of those ones with the silly orange handles that you buy in a drugstore. Specialized scissors that you could really use as tools. But she also lived like this, and this was her sewing workshop in the basement. I don't have her organizational skills. Mine are a little different. But she and my father brought to us a sense of family. I'm again the one in the picture with the headband on. These are my cousins. These are my cousins more than 40 years later, 50 years later, actually, I think. We're a very, very close family and continue to be so as the generations increase. I got married to a guy I had met when I was 10 years old. He's 20 years old in this picture and a little over 70 in this one. We have dogs. We had a baby. She went to school in New York. She's not here, so I can show you this picture. She has two wonderful godfathers because we shared with her our life of creative and interesting people, whether it was having dinner with Einar Garten or driving around with Jeffrey getting a tour of East Hampton architecture. And she recently got married, I'm very happy to say. I'm not yet a grandmother, but believe me, if they invite me to do this again, I hope to have better news. And there's one more thing I want to say before I end my description of what it is I think it is to be an architect, which is to think big about practice, show art and invite artists, talk to children and explain to them what the built environment is about, whatever their age might be. Build, get your hands dirty, get blisters, support people who make things, support people who plant things. Give yourself some solitude and some peace. Think about how people live in communities. Allow yourself some serious conversation with people worth talking to. and know that the truest measure of good design is the good that it does in the world. I have one more thing to say, and that is this talk is all said in the first person singular, which is actually a pronoun I don't particularly like, because I don't do this, we do this. Thank you very much.
It was so beautiful to see this influence from your perspective and see these pictures that are so unique, and also from your mother. That I really love those pictures. In an interview that I was listening to it, preparing for the interview that we're having now, you say that I'm a happy girl, that you love what you do and you love the people that you are doing it with. What are the gems or the little moments of joy that makes you feel very happy?
I think one is blessed to be a happy person, but if one is not, one should really work on it, because life is miserable enough without you yourself also being miserable. I learned it from my parents and my grandmother. It is profound good fortune to be alive, and you should wake up every day grateful. Now, not everybody's life is easy. People go without food, without housing, whatever. One can try in whatever form of work one does to make their lives better. That also makes you happy. But I think we have a choice. We wake up and we look out at the world, and you can decide that morning, am I going to be like a pissant idiot and hate everything? Or am I going to look at the shining sun, watch the breeze move the leaves, smile at the person sitting across from me on the subway, and make my own day and their day a little bit better?
For me, that aligns with what you said of the mentors, that what people you worked with at your beginnings, that you said, especially one that was suddenly nice and kind of kind and supportive, and that looks like you try to do it with others. What do you feel like is your biggest responsibility as an architect, as an educator at the moment? You have so many students. I don't know, what do you feel for you like your main goal, or one of the main goals to achieve?
My main goal for me personally? Wow. Eek. To continue to make good buildings as an architect, to continue to help train the next generation of architects to care about beauty and generosity and making good buildings. And in a way, look, everybody in this room cares about architecture in some way or another, cares about design in some way or another. But for the people who aren't part of our world, but that we still talk to and encounter, writers, dancers, businessmen, accountants, dentists, dental hygienists, like people who have very, very different kinds of jobs, is to give them as well the grace and to get out of their jobs what we are so fortunate to be able to get out of ours. I mean, being an architect is a profoundly optimistic thing. As Moshe said, can you judge a building when it's done? No, you judge it in 20 years or 50 years, or maybe it gets judged long after you're gone. We build for a long time. But in the present, it is about, I think, living with grace and generosity. And if you can manifest that in your buildings, even better.
And how can we foster generosity in others as well? I feel like that's part of drama. Because you feel like you are a people's person, as you say. You had that.
Yeah. I like empathy.
Yeah. You're empathetic with others. You feel like generosity approach from the very beginning. But how to foster that in others that might not have that as one of their priorities?
You can't force it in others, but I do think if you live it, there's a chance others will notice and copy you, right? You know, when people behave like jerks, you watch others around them. Being a jerk is contagious. I would like to imagine that being a decent human being can be contagious too.
Yep. One of your mentors, you haven't mentioned it, but you say about Robert Gottman that
Sociologist, yeah.
he say that there are three things about being an architect. That is like get the work, do the work, but also run the business.
Yeah. Does anybody in this room know who Robert Gutman is? Bob Gutman, who used to teach at Princeton? A couple of hands go up. Can I interrupt you? Because I know
No,
you're
go ahead. You
this.
can also say what he taught you in that sense.
So Bob Gutman was an extraordinary guy. He was a sociologist who spent his career only studying architecture. And he came to visit me when I was a very, very young architect. I had an office on Lafayette Street. I think I had 3 employees, and I rented a desk to Stan Allen. I remember that. And Bob Gutman came, and he came through the door, and he said, I have to tell you something right away. And I said, whoa, what's that? Professor Gutman, sir. And he said, you don't charge enough. And I said, how do you know? We haven't even started our conversation. And he said, because no architect charges enough. That was lesson number 1. And then he took me out to lunch, and he said, here's what you have to know. To be a successful architect, you have to get the work, you have to do the work, and you have to run the business. And no one can do all 3. Nobody's brain is wired like that. Many, many people can do 2. But there is a reason that there's Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, McKim, Mead, and White, Cohn, Pedersen, Fox. You sort of get these characters lined up who each do one of those things. So he said to me, you decide which you're good at or which you want to do, and then you find the right people to work with such that you can build a successful practice. And it was one of the best pieces of advice I ever got. I'm sorry he's not with us anymore. I'd love for him to be out there somewhere, knowing that his advice to a very young architect actually had an impact.
So that advice was to you to pick wisely your partners, or how that?
Well, I think more broadly, pick
apart from the rate that you were charging.
Well, yeah, and I didn't. That was the one thing I didn't learn, unfortunately. You make it sound a little bit more. Pick wisely your partners. I think back to what we were talking about before about happiness in life. Pick wisely the people you surround yourself with. You want them to be good partners, but you also want them to be people you look forward to seeing in the morning and you want to work with.
Obviously, yes.
Yeah.
But they have to complement you in that way.
They have to complement you in that way. You don't want your clones. You don't want to work with your clones. You want to work with your complements. No.
But because we see that many practices on architecture are struggling also with the business side of it, because there's a huge part of passion on the architecture work, do the work maybe, but not on running the business or getting the work, which is two very different things.
Where's the question?
What should we do? Tell us. You can tell me you are not charging it. What do you tell others to do in order to run better a business?
Be timely, manage the expectations. Moshe is probably better at answering this question than I am. Be timely, manage your clients' expectations, charge fairly for your work, and deliver professional services such that when you ask to be paid, you are entitled to be paid.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I'll call you and let you know if it works.
Well, we'll do that. Deborah, thank you for the beautiful talk. We're going to have a break now, and later we'll have the roundtable discussion with the two of you.